Maurice Wood Award for Lifetime Contribution to Primary Care Research. This award is given to honor a researcher who has made an outstanding contribution to primary care research over the course of their lifetime. Scientists from all nations working in all professional fields and scientific disciplines are eligible to receive the award, which is presented here at our annual meeting of the North American Primary Care Research Group. NAPCRAG was founded by Maurice Wood and his colleagues, and Maurice himself was a pioneer in primary care research, and it's in his honor that we give this award. I'm very proud to announce that this year's recipient of the Maurice Wood Award is Kurt Stange. Kurt has, as you all know, been an outstanding leader in research and a real joy to work with. I have to tell one brief story. I'll make it very brief.
Audio Jungle.
I went to Mexico.
Audio Jungle.
I became a resident. You were the person who really inspired me to go into research. And I don't know if you remember this, in the course of that residency, I think I wrote about 3 grant applications that never got funded. But it didn't stop me because your enthusiasm was what kept me going.
Jungle.
So anyway, I'd like to bring up Rebecca Etz, one of our for Kurt and his award.
in that swamp, there is an inspiring, nurturing garden. That garden was planted and tended by gentle and wise Maurice Wood. We call it Knapcraig. And you will find Kurt gardening there with us. Being with Kurt, I discovered how to swim in the riptide, against the current, never going back the way you came, and never trying to swim against it. I learned to tack against the wind, keeping my eye on the horizon and the shore, centering in my heart, but always with the trickster's smile. I would like everyone to hold hands with somebody near them, a neighbor at your table, or even across the tables. Remember, this is the story of us. All right, now, close your eyes. As you hold that hand, I want you to feel the deep, hidden connections. Those are the source of our persistent, hopeful imaginations. And among those connections, as you feel them, you will find Kurt practicing hospitality, using the disciplines of critical thought, community, and fidelity, celebrating abundance.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Becca.
Audio Jungle.
Talk about discovering deep connectedness, the deep connectedness that underlies our lives, that is the heart of the generalist healer, that is the spirit of Knapcraig. To show the pathways to connection, I'll talk about three things. I'll talk about Knapcraig and how we work together as individuals in the same way that an aspen forest gives the illusion of separate trees, but is deeply connected below and with other organisms as a single biome. I'll talk about primary care and how we can discover together, as David Meyer has just charged us, to deeply understand how it works and what is important. And then I'll close by talking about what's next for me and I hope for us. I am deeply grateful for the honor of the Maurice Wood Award, and grateful because it comes from NAPCRAG. It's such a joy to find your tribe, people who share your values, who balance your weaknesses, who nurture and challenge and love you. NAPCRAG, its people, have been that for me. I'm honored to be included with my heroes who have gone before, and with the future I see in those who are reinventing how we understand and act on our core values. And I'm particularly grateful to Maurice Wood. Every one of you knows Maurice. At this meeting, you know Maurice when you feel both supported and challenged, have the opportunity to incubate risky or outrageous ideas, knowing that people have your back, feel grounded in shared values. And let me use this moment to correct the misconception that I tried to swipe Maurice's 80th birthday cake. My hand slipped, I didn't have a napkin, and I had to lick the frosting off my fingers. Award ceremonies like this give us a chance to focus on the difference that one person can make. In these moments, we emphasize the heroic aspect of our nature, and the many big and small ways one person can make a difference. And this can be inspiring, as long as we don't let it go to our heads. My experience is more closely aligned with the story of the collective that reminds us how much we need each other, how much our individual success is due to connections with others, and how transcendent and abundant the shared story is. Will is fond of saying that working together creates abundance out of shortage. That is my experience. 25 years ago, inexperienced investigators got together with experienced family physicians and later with community members and organizations. We wanted to directly observe how family physicians do our craft. We were scared. We were scared that we proposed something impossible, but we also found a shared sense that together we had so much more. We were so much more. We might contribute so much more. We became friends by working to get over ourselves to do something larger than ourselves together. 17 years ago, 6 organizations included but went beyond their individual self-interests to launch a forum for sharing new knowledge about health and primary care. In the Analyst Collective that developed, it's much more than was originally envisioned. Last year, a group got together to try to understand and advance community health and integrated personalized care. And a little ways in, it feels uncertain and inadequate, as things usually do in the middle. Yet there is hope in taking on great challenges together. I can't think of anything worthwhile I've done solely by myself. Deep connection is the stock and trade of the family doctor, of family medicine, of primary care. It also is the source of health and healing for the vast majority of those we treat. Yet these healing connections remain largely hidden from our research and our policies because we don't understand the deep connectedness and how it relates to what's important in our lives and work. We deny the experience of connection that is part of our lives because we don't have a way to name and value it. We love to quote Barbara Starfield's now decades-old research that systems based on primary care have healthier populations, less healthcare expenditure, and greater equity. These benefits of primary care vary, though, with the social and political and personal context. These outcomes of primary care are not preordained. They can be wiped out if we forget and lose sight of what really matters about family medicine and primary care. How do we think primary care actually works? Our most succinct and treasured principles are Starfield's 4 C's. But how do these actually work? What is deeply important that we don't see because we just look on the surface? What if we reimagine these tenets and look for the connectedness underneath? And what's missing from these tenets? And please treat that not as a rhetorical question. I'd like to ask you to take a moment to reflect on what's missing in how we understand how primary care provides value. Anybody got a word that describes what might be missing, what might be below the surface? Connection. Caring, trust. Relationship. Complexity. What was that last one? Compassion. As scientists, we have a method for doing our work, but we don't really pay attention to where the hypotheses come from. And I'd like to ask you to use this meeting as a chance to reflect on what might be missing and how we understand how what we're studying, what we're trying to act on actually works. Reflect on your personal experience. Reflect on what you hear from others, what you see others doing. I think that's one of our challenges. And I'd like to share a few to help kind of foster that discussion. So what about the inclusively defined family in family medicine? It turns out that if you directly observe visits to family physicians, the family comes up in half of new patient visits, almost a quarter of visits by established patients. In 18% of visits to a family physician, care is provided to a family member other than the identified patient for that visit. That means that if a family physician is seeing 28 patients in a day, she's already cared for another 5 family members. And except for the 5 families, nobody knows. And what about the community focus of family medicine and primary care? The branding firm we hired to do research for the Future Family Medicine Project called the community focus the best kept secret of family practice. But now we're trying to move from small, local, informal systems to big systems. And the bigger systems are clunky and impersonal. Now this community focus is being rediscovered as the social determinants of health. And we have the opportunity to bring in the big picture and neighborhood data and humbly participatory partnership. But we need to avoid the arrogance of only having the high-level view. We need to make sure we support the people on the ground doing the hard work to foster community connections among people. Someone shouted out integration. We often conflate this humble and magnificent attribute with coordination, but it's so much more, and it's crying out for discovery and reinvention. What does it mean to integrate care across acute concerns, multiple chronic illnesses, prevention, family, mental health, balancing the biological and the biographical? Does integrating include paying attention to the context of people's illness? Integration also involves the unappreciated and glorious task of prioritizing, of doing the most important thing in the moment. Health Services researcher Sherry Bolin did an ethnography of diabetes follow-up visits in the community health center in our network that has the best quality numbers. And just for fun, I asked her to pay attention to the number of problems that come up in a simple diabetes follow-up visit. 6 months later, she came back with her answer. 25, she said. Oh, come on, that can't be right. Look at the data, she said. So I did, and she was right. So at this practice, the team does most of the routine box-ticking care. 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's 9 problems. The doctor then listens to the patient's story. She tries to do something to help with the 3 acute complaints that the person came in with. She finds a teachable moment where it links an immediate concern that the patient had to a behavior change that could provide long-term benefit. Then she finds out why the patient isn't taking her medicines. She left them behind when she moved out on her boyfriend, who was abusing her daughter. 6 more problems, constantly reprioritizing. The doctor invests into the relationship through deep listening, what Donner Banshoff called inductive foraging, that leads to a more patient-centered approach. The doctor then starts taking away medical burden and side effects. She chooses an old, single, cheap generic drug to help with the patient's diabetic neuropathy, arthritis, anxiety. and uses the side effects of that medicine to help the patient's irritable bowel syndrome and insomnia. 22 problems. And the resulting growth in trust allows her to start a plan for tapering the patient's narcotics. And the sense of being known and the glimpses of hope are therapeutic in themselves. Only the box ticking at the beginning gets any credit in our quality measures or seen in our quality improvement research. And little of this is informed by the dominant research and quality improvement and evidence-based medicine paradigms that see healthcare as a commodity and not as a relationship. Integrating and prioritizing care for whole people may be the most unique and important and under-recognized things we do. Personalizing care for individuals based on local knowledge of families and communities. These attributes, these ways of knowing and being and doing, are not well described as a basket of services. They're not likely to be achieved by flogging the people on the front lines to crank more people through the office in so-called productivity. They are, however, helpful hypotheses for our research, and they're a rallying cry for advocacy in a system and society that is increasingly fragmented and commodified and depersonalized. These are the antidotes to those problems. And someone shouted out relationship. Whether we call it continuity or something else, relationship may be the most meaningful tenet to family physicians. Ann and I had the privilege of having Ian McWhinney tour us through the town of his youth, Stratford-upon-Avon. We saw the grammar school where he and Shakespeare in different eras saw their first plays and learned about the drama of life. We visited the practice Ian shared with his father for 14 years. When I saw the sign on the new patient education wing dedicating it to Dr. McWhinney, I said, Ian, it must be gratifying to be recognized by your hometown after having launched family medicine in North America and written a definitive textbook. Oh no, he said, quickly correcting me. He said, the plaque is not for me, I left. The sign there is for my father, who stayed. But what does relationship mean for a new generation of patients and clinicians who may not be able to commit to each other for the long term? If continuity isn't a reality, that doesn't mean we should give up on relationship, but rather we must figure out what it means now and how it can be supported in different contexts. Research on several thousand patients seeing family physicians discovered two pathways to people valuing relationships with their family physician: length of time together and the degree to which patients could endorse this statement. This doctor and I have been through a lot together. How do we reimagine what it means to be meaningfully present at key moments in people's lives? When can it be asynchronous? When can it be physically remote? I believe there are 4 levels of care. The lowest level, the most basic, is where clinical prevention, disease care, mental health care, where that lives, where all of our science and evidence-based guideline lives. But there also is a need for evidence and investment in the higher levels that include prioritizing, integrating, healing, and transcendence. The mystery and potential increases as the reductionist measurability declines. And how do these things work together to create a whole? How does humble listening and open honesty lead to understanding and glimpses of wisdom? How does being known lead to a deeper diagnosis, which sometimes leads to cure, which improves trust? All of which are investments in the the interest-bearing account of relationship that can be drawn upon during the dark moments when healing is most needed and most possible. Our science needs to catch up with the complexity of the phenomena we're trying to understand. There's a huge research agenda in figuring out how the pieces of primary care work magnificently together to create a breathtaking whole that includes but transcends the parts. NAPCRG is one place where we come to share the tools and the motivation and the support for this important work. Well, what's next for me, working, I hope, with you? I'll be working with Becca and Will and Bob Phillips and Sarah and Jonathan and others on measuring what matters. At your place, there's an 11-item measure and 3 simple rules that we hope you'll want to collaborate with us on. With many colleagues, I'm also working to develop a learning community that uses computer simulation modeling to operationalize and to do in silico experiments with what might matter in primary care, and to understand how unexpected outcomes can emerge from their complex interaction. NAPCRG's multi-morbidity and complexity science groups are a good place to have community if you're interested in this kind of work. The new Larry A. Green Center for the Advancement of Primary Care for the Public Good, for which Becca and I serve as co-directors, provides a platform for collaboration. The Center for Community Health Integration does research and development for community health and personalized integrated care. Come work with us. There are ads for new faculty positions on the inside cover of the paper meeting book. I'll continue to spend the early morning hours working on a novel. It's the hero's journey of a new family physician who defies the corporate medical structure and system that trained her to set up a new independent practice in a Rust Belt city. As the challenges of the community beat her down and the systems are lurking ready to gobble her up, she struggles to reinvent the ideals of her general practitioner grandfather for herself and for a new generation, and for the community with which she has a deep, mysterious personal connection. To make time for all this, I'll be moving on from the privilege of serving as editor for Annals. I have confidence that the collective of sponsoring organizations, authors, editors, and diverse contributors will continue to make Annals a force for integration in a fragmented world. I'll be focusing more energy on living an 8-pointed program based on meditation that I've been following for the past 17 years. Those of you who know me realize how imperfect my practice is on this path. But like primary care, these multiple practices are much more together than they are separately. A little progress in one practice, connected to another, can reveal deep glimmers of the deep unity that underlies all of life. I'm going to spend the rest of my professional life trying to discover and live and communicate the deep connectedness of the generalist healer and the connected community. I will spend the rest of my personal life opening myself to the deep connectedness that underlies all of life. These are not different. And finally, what might be next for us as a collective of connected individuals and as a discipline? We cannot pursue our ideals without being part of the larger conversations of our era. When family medicine was being birthed from general practice in North America, Gail Stevens observed that we are countercultural. The family practice movement has succeeded in the decade just past because we were identified with reforms that are more pervasive and powerful than ourselves. I'm convinced that the emergence of family practice was a response to ideas whose time had come, and that our continued success is dependent on our ability to identify what they are and to facilitate their expression, not to manage, control, or own them. Gail is imploring us to be part of the larger, beautifully messy society around us. He's asking us to search for the deep stream of development within that foamy foment that is moving inexorably toward greater connection. In an editorial a couple months ago, Michelle Alexander asserted that those who are resisting outrageous acts of hatred, fear-mongering, and greed are not the resistance. Alexander suggests that the resistance actually is from the proponents and perpetrators of selfish isolation. They, and those same conditioned greedy tendencies in each of us, are resisting the larger evolution of a collective consciousness that recognizes and acts on our deep connectedness. We need not only resist, we need to persist as part of the great flow of history and development toward rediscovering our unity. Together we can ride and amplify waves of deep connection by tossing in our little pebbles until the ripples become a tsunami of collective will. We can work off our rough edges by discovering and engaging generalist principles with those closest to us, drowning our greed, anger, and fear in the tsunami of the collective, so that we can lose ourselves in the deep connected forest of hopeful imagination and action. Just as family medicine was born from general practice in the foment of the 1960s, we now need to reinvent ourselves as part of the emerging evolution of commonality. We must be part of the larger reinvention of which family medicine, primary care, its values, its practices, its ways of knowing are a vital part, but only a part. In recognizing that we are part of something larger, there is wholeness, there is peace, there is strength. It's time to develop our understanding, our trust, and our practice of the deep connectedness that underlies our lives and that is the heart of the generalist healer.